Coffee with Caregivers production costs are covered by a partnership with United Healthcare and the National Foster Parent Association. We receive no federal or state funding and depend on our constituents and viewers to help us achieve our goals to provide support and services that meet identified needs within our mission. We would like to welcome the viewers of Coffee with Caregivers to the family. The National Foster Parent Association offers several membership opportunities for individuals, child placing agencies, and state and local affiliates. You can join today or donate at nfpaonline.org.
Well, good morning. I hope this is everybody really for the day. I know that things have been really interesting around our house lately, and you may wonder what's in that tree behind Irene's head there. I was just telling some other folks that our tree is going to stay up this year all year long, so now it's got some Valentine's things on it, trying to simplify life a little bit. I think last week I mentioned that my husband had fractured his neck, well, actually broke his neck. And so he's been in the hospital for a while and now in a rehab facility. And we heard this today that he may get to come home in a couple of days. So we're very excited about that. But we're looking to simplify our life a little bit because for the next 3 to 5 months, he's going to need a lot of assistance from me and some others while he navigates with this big brace that he's going to have to be wearing that keeps his head from moving and all those kinds of things. So looking to simplify life when we're in ways that we can and enjoy it. And we love the tree. So we decided that maybe that would be something fun for him to come back and see when he gets to come home. I occasionally read something to you that I get from a gentleman named Sean Dietrich. And he calls his blog the Sean of the South. And I signed up for it and I get it every single day, 7 days a week. The man's amazing. But what he writes absolutely speaks to me. Just seems like every day he wrote that for me. And I think he does that. People feel that way about him who read his work. This one really struck me. And I thought, this is something that perhaps all of us could use, some of the perspective that Sean provides in his blog article. So I hope you will bear with me while I read this through to the end. And it's called What Happens Next? And Sean says, I received an anxious email from a 26-year-old woman named Candace, who, among other things, writes, I'm so expletive mad right now. America is a double expletive train wreck. And why are people so evil? What's going to happen to us? At first, I was not sure how to answer this message since I'm no expert. But then it dawned on me, I can actually answer her question, which is rare for me. Many times I'm asked questions I cannot answer. Questions such as, what is the capital of Ohio? Are you an Episcopalian? And why didn't you pull over when I flashed my blue lights, sir? As you know, Sean writes with some humor. So I'll answer your question outright, Candace. I'll tell you exactly what's going to happen to America next, play by play. The first thing that will happen tomorrow is that at 6:42 a.m. in my hometown, the sun will rise. It will rise at a 7:11 in Boston, at 7:42 in Atlanta, 7:17 in St. Louis, at 6:51 in Las Vegas, and in Seattle, meteorologists expect to see the sun in mid-July. After sunrise, people will stumble out of bedrooms, yawning, dressed in pajamas. Well, technically, only 52% of Americans will be wearing pajamas. The other half will be buck naked. I'm completely serious. Roughly 48% of Americans sleep unclothed or partially clothed. And in the coming years, this statistic will change because a survey recently discovered that 2/3 of millennials sleep in the raw. So after we Americans stagger from bedrooms wearing nothing but the joy of the Lord, do you know where this country will be heading next? That's right, the coffee pot. Currently, 150 million Americans drink coffee. This means that each morning, as a nation, we fiddle with Japanese manufactured coffee makers to brew the sacred life juice that nourishes our stimulate deprived animal brains into low level awareness. What happens to our nation next? Glad you asked. Something urgent. While coffee perks 85 million US household pets scratch at the back door in unison. 63 million of these pets are dogs, and each one needs to pee. Think about this national scenario, Candace. Tomorrow morning in this wonderful country, 63 million canines will simultaneously trot outside to write their names on the lawn, so to speak. I'm not necessarily saying this is living in national harmony, but it is a start. When the coffee is ready, a mere 23% of Americans will read newspapers, paper newspapers. Sadly, few subscribe to physical newspapers anymore, which means that most Americans will be consuming their news on phones. Approximately 96% of Americans own cell phones. Most read their news on these electronic screens. And here's something else. When Americans browse these morning headlines, can you guess where they are usually sitting? Most Americans, and I'm not trying to be gross, read the news in the bathroom. These are just the facts, Candace. You asked what was going to happen to us. I'm telling you. And the fact is, 98% of Americans report visiting the loo daily between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m. That's an overwhelming majority. So, in other words, we Americans might not agree on much, but roughly 321.4 million of us definitely agree on this precious 4-hour window. After we Americans finish our nationwide moment of deep reflection, what happens to us? This: most of us will eat bacon. Again, this is all true. In a recent study based on US Census data, about 82% of America regularly eats bacon. This might not sound impressive until you consider that 10 years ago, hardly anyone admitted to eating bacon publicly. In fact, if you told your doctor you ate bacon, he would immediately start showing you casket catalogs from the local funeral home. Not anymore. Today, 268 million Americans eat bacon, and 21% say they plan to eat bacon every morning of their lives. This is partly because in 2016, US nutritionists began suggesting that cholesterol in food may not affect your cholesterol negatively, which was a real breakthrough for amateur pork enthusiasts like me. And this is also why people started eating eggs again. Remember when eggs were once blacklisted by the medical community? That's all over now. Groundbreaking research recently proved that eggs aren't bad after all. And this is exactly the kind of scientific research we need to fund in America right now. All those in favor of university research aimed at uncovering the benefits of Anheuser-Busch products, raise your hands. So I'm running out of room here, and I still haven't fully answered your question about what happens next in America. I haven't even gotten past breakfast. I've only named a scant few marvelous things happening in the United States. I haven't told you about the amount of Americans who will donate to charities this year. Did you know that 6 out of 10 households give significantly to charities? Neither have I told you how many annual kids are fortunate enough to attend college, 8.2 million, or about the 3.2 million abused animals that are adopted each year. Oh, and I could also tell you that each year 135,000 children get adopted. I truly hope you think about this number for a moment, because that means that on average, 15 kids per hour are finding forever families. A few of these children write to me from time to time, like the young man named Eric who wrote a few weeks ago. Here is how Eric's letter read. Quote, I have finally been adopted and am going to my new home on Friday. I get my own room and they got me some shoes so I can play basketball. Please pray for me because I'm real nervous, but I'm so excited that somebody really wants me. End of quote. Yes, Candace, I know that things aren't good in this country right now, but people still are. Now, I don't know if that is as impactful for you as it was for me when I read it, but boy, did it sure help me put some perspective to what I see and hear every day, and get back in touch with the realities that people are still good. All right. So, enough of that, right? Um, I got a new cup. This one came from a friend at Christmas, and I'm going to turn it around because the writing is small. It says, "Trust the journey." She actually brought this to me after Christmas, about a week and a half, right after my husband had his break, and she said, "I think you're probably gonna need this message because you've got a real journey ahead of you. The two of you do, and your family." And she's right. So I'm celebrating my Trust the Journey cup today. Cheers. All right. Now on to the best part of what we're going to do today. I get to introduce you to two incredible human beings, two of the good guys. So I want to introduce you to Kate Hawks and Stephen Porges. Hi there. How are y'all? Um, I'm going to ask Kate and Steve to introduce themselves. Kate's going to take the lead, I believe, and they'll tell you a little about themselves, about what they want you to know about themselves, and they'll introduce their cup to you, and then they're going to go into some dialogue, and I'll chime in once in a while as well. But I've asked Kate to take a lead on interviewing Dr. Porges because she knows him better than I do, and I want to learn from him. So I want to be able to pay attention. So, Kate, you want to get started?
Sure. And I think my quote today for everybody is, given that this is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s day, as I just want to say something that I think resonates very well with foster, adoptive, and kinship families and the tremendous researchers we have in this country, like Dr. Porges. Dr. Martin Luther King said, "Everybody can be great because anybody can serve. You only need a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love. Remember, celebrate, and act." And every day, you as foster parents are doing that very thing. And researchers like Dr. Porges are as well. So we're really thrilled to have him here. And thank you very much, Steve, for joining us.
Well, thank you. I will introduce my mug.
Okay, please
It
do.
is a Wi-Fi enabled mug that my son gave me for my birthday, which was just, I think, it was about a week ago. Unfortunately, the app is very complicated, and I'm still trying to figure it out. I'll manage it. I met Kate and Irene. It's almost 10 years ago. What's about 8 years ago?
Probably.
Something like that.
In
Yeah.
Norfolk at a that was the academy meeting for foster parents, and it was really kind of a transformative moment for me. I first have to tell you who I am. I'm a professor at Indiana University. I created the Traumatic Stress Research Consortium. I hold the title of Distinguished University Scientist there, and I'm also professor of psychiatry at the University of North Carolina. But put it in another perspective, I'm a very mature individual, and I now have the freedom and luxury to tell you why all that hard work, all those publications were of any value. And because this stage of my life is all about translating knowledge into practice,
Right.
reaching out and embracing people like you and understanding what you're doing and trying to facilitate that. And my work led me to a theoretical model. It's called the polyvagal theory. But in very simple words, it's all about our body's need to connect with others. So in the theme of what Irene and Kate were talking about, it's all about our own biological imperative as being a mammal. Humans are mammals. And our biological imperative is to connect and to trust and to feel safe in the presence of another. And the whole journey of being a successful human being is, in a sense, creating those connections that enable us to feel safe. And in Irene's reading of the blog, the reaction to the woman, Candace, I think was the woman who wrote the email or the question to, that she was really frightened. So her body was in a state of threat. And when you talk about any foster child moving into adoption or changing families, their bodies are under states of threat. And what we don't realize is that threat is not merely a psychological phenomenon. It changes our whole body. It affects how we think, how we see the world. It affects our digestion. It affects our health. But humans, like mammals, other mammals, are unique among species with backbones, vertebrates. And that is, we detect cues of safety. So more primitive reptiles and amphibia and fish, they detect threat, but they don't detect safety.
Oh.
So everything in our life is this quest for cues of safety, to navigate in a world of safety. And when we look at the world of children being removed, often through legal counsels, from their biological parents and being placed into foster and adoptive families, we know that those children were under severe threat early in life. And in fact, for some of them, they don't even have a mental image of what something happy and safe is. And that retuning of their body creates all these great risks. So when you start looking at risks of individuals who have been through the foster children pathway, and where they're overrepresented in death row, overrepresented in early pregnancies, or overrepresented in prisons, it's because their bodies have been retuned to treat the world as if the world is a hostile, threatening place. And what foster parents do, and what the foster family program is all about, it's giving cues of safety to these children, because cues of safety are triggers in our neurobiology that we can't refuse. And when I went to Norfolk, and Cate invited me to talk there several years ago, there were a couple of realizations. When I left, I came home, I said, I've met some real angels. I've met people who were so accepting to others, to children, even though they would tell me that we've accepted them and we acknowledge that we're going to be, let's say, injured or hurt by them, but our hearts are there. And I was listening to these people and I said, these are angels. The other thing was, when I was standing out in front of the audience to talk, I had a memory relapse. I realized that my aunt, who was a social worker, was in charge of foster children in the state of New Jersey. And I had been, it was one of these memories that you just push back and you don't think about it. And my mother had been a social worker before she had children, and then she had children and she became an elementary school teacher. But they were working as caseworkers in the families, dealing with the issues that you are dealing with. So I'm very taken by this whole notion of how do you deal and how do you optimize the human experience for children whose early life has been so disrupted that they don't have the normal, or let's say typical, I can't even use those words now, let's use the word optimal, where of safety, of the love and caring of their parents, because their parents are in such a state of threat in their own bodies that they are aggressive and reactive to their own children.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Steve. And I think one of the things that I want to go back to that you just spoke about was this idea that a foster parent who is now providing a safe environment for the child to grow can basically begin to recalibrate the memories, right? And to help build resilience. Can you tell us a little bit more about how foster parents can support that growth?
Well, what we learned, so this is, again, I didn't start off, and I still am not a clinician. I was basically a laboratory scientist, but I developed a model and a theory, and suddenly that theory started to have traction, especially in the world of trauma. And you can't separate the world of trauma from the world of early childhood experiences that retune individual children's nervous systems that make them more reactive, more defensive, more aggressive.
Mhm.
And if you're dealing in the world of foster children, many of them have experienced this early trauma. And remember, being removed from biological parents in itself is a traumatic event. So we know that this whole world of trauma is about the retuning of a nervous system of the individual, not to be welcoming and accessible, but to be cautious, hypervigilant, and defensive, because the person has to protect themselves from being injured. Now, what Cate is really discussing is, how do you retune that nervous system?
Mhm.
And the strategy is, does the child, I guess in the dialogue with the child or with the foster child, is do they have memories of anything positive? When they are ill, or when they are feeling stressed, or when they are scared, what's the mental image that they pull down that helps them calm down? And what we find out is that for many children who are foster children, they don't have very much to pull back on. Now, think about yourself of going to a dentist or going in for a medical procedure. Well, we're going to get into that, but what you do is you carry a feeling of a loved one, a good experience with you, and that is a top-down regulator of a bottom-up fear. And the interesting part is it's a demonstration that feelings of love and caring and connection are more powerful than feelings of fear and uncertainty. And so the retuning of the foster child has to deal with shared experiences where that nervous system of the foster child starts to get attuned to or used to pleasant things.
Mhm. I love that. I love that. And one of the things that you had talked to us about in Norfolk was helping us to understand, like, that there is actually a phenomena that happens with what's coming in, what the child's receiving, and then how the organs of the body are actually reacting to that. Can you talk to us a little bit
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah. So we live in this very partitioned or disciplined worldview where we think that things are going on inside people's heads and they're independent of what goes on inside of their bodies.
Mhm.
So I would basically say that for many foster children and for many children who have anxiety disorders or any type of diagnostic label you want to make, they have gut problems. They have irritable bowel. Their digestive system is responding in a way that is telling you that their body feels as if it were under threat. It is under threat. And we are in the belief system that we can keep demanding from people and they will produce, they will work. But what happens in this evaluative world model that we have, evaluation is interpreted by the nervous system as being in a state of threat. It's threatening. So many children don't want to go to school and they have gut problems. You get them into the school and they have to come home because the pain is so much. What they're telling you is that their bodies are detecting cues of threat in those environments. And we have to be respectful of that, as opposed to initially, or at least almost, I would say initially and then almost universally, saying they're faking it. And we have to say that this is really, they're telling you something about their body's reaction. So we can actually make ourselves ill by reacting to threat, because what threat does to the brain's regulation of the organs in our body, threat takes away the positive organizing capacity, which is called homeostasis, interferes with that homeostatic health and growth and maturation function, and diverts all the resources for defense. It's
Right.
kind of like a Star Trek. The energy shields come up, and you don't have any energy, neural energy, to do anything useful. So the body is either defending itself or it's accessible. And we have to be very careful, because we have to understand that being accessible is being vulnerable.
Right.
And we can't tell people who have been injured, and many foster children have been injured,
Mhm.
you have to be accessible,
Right.
because they may say, I know I have to be accessible, but I get scared. And
Right.
they're telling you what's happening in their bodies.
Right. And that might be some of what happens with the organs, is the organs are giving them that respite time to get away from everybody, because I don't feel well, so I'm going to go in my room, right?
Right. So it's the withdrawal behaviors become adaptive, because if you can withdraw and you're in a room, you see, you gave a very important clue. It's not just social withdrawal, it's in a room. Rooms have boundaries.
Right.
If we think about the history of humanity, the building of buildings, and we think about what types of rooms we use to sleep so we don't have to be vigilant, and what types of rooms do we go to deal with our bodily functions so we don't have to be vigilant. And what the child is telling you, I want to go into my room so I don't have to be vigilant. I don't have to be in a defensive state.
Right. Because I already have the physical defenses right there.
That's right.
So another thing that I think would be really helpful, and we haven't talked about this in advance or anything, but with all of the events that are happening, we have the COVID, which has created all of the isolations, but then we have all of the violence that kids are seeing on TV that are happening in real time, not fantasy, in our world, from the Black Lives Matter protests to the riots in the Capitol. And if you're a child who has come from the foster care system, or is in the foster care system, or even a child who's still living in an abusive or neglectful situation, what do these kinds of situations create for the kids, and how can we as parents soothe and help them to develop that resilience?
Okay, there's two big parts to this. Very big.
Break it down however you like.
Okay. So the first part has to do with, what is it that our nervous system likes? What is it that makes us feel safe? Predictability.
Right.
So remember what Irene read about the blog. He's giving this woman predictability. Every morning you get up, you have your cup of coffee, you do this. That's what our nervous system loves. It loves predictability. But we have two vectors, two trajectories that are disrupting our predictability. One has been the pandemic, and the other has been the political unrest. And both of them create a unpredictability about how our day-to-day life can be run.
Right.
And the I would say paradox, I would say almost the true crime to humanity, to our own nervous system, is that both of them create such uncertainty. So when you have the pandemic and now you have a vaccine, what's the next crisis you have from that? How do you get the vaccine? So the issue of plans and messaging become everything. We are an interesting organism. We don't mind problems, but we want to know that there is a solution to that problem that we can follow. And this is really where federal or national or presidential messaging becomes important, to tell the public that this is how it needs to be done. But if we can't get there, and we can actually see where this has led us, because the United States has the worst record of any country in the world. If you look at the numbers of India, India has a much larger population, about 3 times the population of the US, fewer people with COVID, fewer have died, and they have it under control. It's going down. And to me, it's totally remarkable. Why, with all our resources and our intelligence, are we infecting each other? And so what we've done is create uncertainty in our day-to-day lives. So you can't go to the grocery store, you can't go different places. It's not an issue of individual rights. It's the issue of someone might be sloppy and may spit at you or sneeze on you, and you'll get sick. And if you're a mature adult, you may be dead. So we're up to about 400,000 people who have died. It's not insignificant. And if you're like me, I'm 76. And if you look at the numbers of, if you're over 75, what's it, 10% die if they get this, or maybe more? a higher percent get hospitalized, it becomes life-threatening. It's not merely getting a cold.
Right. So what I'm hearing from you from that is that one of the opportunities that we have as foster, adoptive, and kinship families, when we see these things happening and the children are aware of what's happening, is to work with them on understanding we have a plan.
Yeah.
Our plan in our family, here's how we're going to deal with this. And so that going ahead and taking this matter on head first with the family, throughout the family, meeting as a family and planning together can help the body to regulate this trauma that they're seeing on TV. Is that correct?
I totally agree with you. The compromise, I would say, the actual difficulty is if you're in a stressed family to begin with, under these features. Let's say you're food insecure or you're financially insecure. You don't have, and you're homeschooling. You're trying to work from home if you have a job. The tension and the compassion of the parents for the children is going to be greatly compromised.
Right.
So, but Kate, your point is right. If we sat down in any group and said, this is the problem, and this is what we need to get through this, and this is how we're going to do it, then the anxiety, uncertainty disappears because you have a plan,
Right.
and the plan can be implemented. But if we basically sow chaos, uncertainty, we're sowing threat. We're making people feel unsafe. And of course, the children who don't have real life experiences, long life experiences of seeing these cycles come and go, but are also coming from a very high risk environment, high risk population, they're much more vulnerable. We just published a study, not with children, but with adults based upon their childhood trauma histories on how they were responding to the pandemic in terms of anxiety, PTSD symptoms, and worry. But we measured something else. We measured how they interpreted their body responding, their autonomic nervous system. If they experienced great adversity, it was related to more adverse symptoms of the pandemic on the mental health side. However, all the variance was through their autonomic nervous system, meaning that if they had childhood adversity or great adversity in their life, and their body was expressing itself as being more physiologically reactive, meaning gut problems, cardiovascular, in a sense, their body was reacting to the world. Those are the ones who had the adverse effects on anxiety and PTSD symptoms. In fact, if you took that variance from, in a sense, retuning their autonomic nervous system from trauma had little impact on the symptoms, but it had great impact if it was related to a nervous system that became reactive. In the real world, you would see it as an anxious child, an irritable child. You'd see a person with gut problems, inability to sit still, hypervigilant. You would see different behaviors, but autonomically, they might sweat a lot, they might get diarrhea, they might get constipated, they might have palpitations. You would see them in a way of being fragile within the environment. But autonomically, they're meaning the regulation of their organs by their brain, the nervous system's regulation of those organs, they're reactive because their body is interpreting all the cues as threat.
Right. And one of the things that I want to ask you about is a lot of times families will try to shield children from some of the things that they might see on television that are real life things. And you've talked to us a little bit about what that means. And sometimes shielding them, but they still know it's out there, means they're afraid, why aren't you talking to me about this? So it can create more anxiety for them without having a way to talk to them. Do you think that's true?
I think, Kate, what you're really touching on is different ways in which uncertainty results in an unraveling of the child's sense of safety. So you can't look at that. That creates a degree of uncertainty as well. You can say there has to be a discussion, an explanation. I think what's going on is, first of all, I think in a couple of weeks, I think we're getting a message from the new administration of plans. I think all the statements are following a script that this is a problem, but the problem can be solved, and this is what we collectively have to do. And I think as that message gets adopted by more people, it becomes less political. And I think it starts creating a type of cohesion and a plan for it. But under the bottom line is our nervous system wants a plan.
Mhm.
So give me a plan. I can follow plans, and I can get out of this trap.
Right.
Yeah.
Irene, did you have something you wanted to talk about?
No, I just wanted to say that it just makes so much sense to hear you say it using the words that you're using, Steve. And I 100% agree. The unexpected is never a lot of fun, really. And so we all worry about that, and when the other shoe's going to drop. Or I know growing up, very rural, on a farm, we didn't have much, but we knew what we were going to have, and we were self-sustaining. But I went to school with kids who didn't live like I did, lived in town, but were food insecure much of the time, and their reactions to things that happened as we grew up were different. And I always wondered about that. And then when we became foster parents, I really started seeing this all up close and personal with the many children who joined our family over the years. And I'm watching it now with my grandchildren, and I've had some talks with some of my children about, are you making plans? Is there a plan in place for if X happens while this pandemic's going on? Do you have a plan in place for if Y and Z happen? And we've been able to talk about why it's important for kids to know you've thought about it, you've thought it through, you've thought about the what ifs and the scenarios, and you got a plan. Might be one or two or three things. We don't know which one we're going to get to choose, but we've got some things that we've thought about that we can do, but when and if these things happen. It makes a huge difference in how our children, our grandchildren and great grandchildren now are being able to look at the world in a time that's very different for all of us. So your message today has resonated very strongly with me. And I really appreciate, Cate, you taking the lead on working with Steve and letting me kind of absorb a little bit. I was needing, I think, some filling up today, and that really did help me. So thank you from a kind of a personal standpoint there of needing to get back on track with some things for myself personally. I was just looking at my watch, and it really is about time for us to go. And so I'm welcome either of you to kind of a closing statement, but it'd be wonderful if you have one.
Let me talk about fostering and being a foster parent and how important it is to give individuals a sense of protection and safety. And I think the whole underlying theme of fostering, it's a sense of, you're conveying a sense of gratitude of being a human being, a sense of benevolence and compassion to others, but you're enabling this whole metaphor that we all are born with. It's part of our biological imperative, is that we want safe parents. It's metaphorically, it can be a president, it can be a teacher, or it can be a foster parent, or it could be a biological parent. We all want a safe parent.
We need a safe harbor.
Yeah.
And one of the things, I think the closing thing that I would leave with everyone is every week I get to learn more from more and more foster parents across Virginia. And last week we had a great session with a family. And one of the things that this family does that I want to leave people with this little tidbit, because I think it's pretty important. A lot of times kids in foster care are not comfortable talking with what's going on in their life. They're not comfortable talking about how they're being affected by what they're seeing on the news or what they're seeing in school or just being isolated. They're not comfortable talking about it. So this one particular family, this fabulous foster mom named Lori McConnell, when she was raising her children before there was a pandemic and a crisis like we are facing today, she created a mailbox system, and she put a mailbox outside the door, and the daughter was able to write notes, write a letter, and put it in the mailbox with any issues, concerns, or anything that might have troubled her, because oftentimes teenagers, they don't want to tell you face to face what's going on, but they could write it down. And she and Alina would exchange these letters through this mailbox in the home. And Alina, who was the young woman who was adopted, said that gave her such comfort to be able to not have to put her face to face, to talk about something, being able to have some protection from her room and writing things down, putting it in the mailbox, and then going the next day and getting the response. So if you can't do the talking face to face, because sometimes that's not possible, that parents might want to think about this little mailbox trick that Miss McConnell used.
Yeah, that we use the thing about, well, let's go ride in the car. I'll drive and you sit in the back seat,
Mm-hmm.
and then we can talk.
Mm-hmm.
Because we didn't have to look anybody in the eye, right? And we really had a lot of success with that, especially with kids of all ages, really. And they didn't feel quite as intimidated, and probably couldn't see the expression, on the adult's face depending on what they were saying at the time. But that's a trick that works well too. So it's one of the things I like about doing these episodes with Coffee with Caregivers, is we learn things from each other, some from years of experience and others from people who have studied for years and done research, like Steve, who can really speak to how we can make things better for all kids, not just kids in foster care, but particularly for those kids, because we know that they've had a lot of trauma.
Right.
I had the ability to watch a movie today that was emailed to me. Let me find it, by the Institute for Family, and it's called From Place to Place. And they sent it to me so I could watch it online. And it follows 3 youth from close to emancipation from care, where they were not adopted, and into life. And it follows them over a period of years. An incredibly poignant film. One of the young men, Steve, just, he was your typical street kid. He had the weird hair and the different things happening to him, and some tattoos and all of the stuff that we see, the weird clothes, the spiky things on his coat, and all of that. And when he would talk, though, he would hold his heart, and he'd say, if people would have just stuck with me, because I didn't know how, I don't know why I did what I did, but I just kept doing a lot of it and I couldn't stop it. I just did things, and my body did things, and I didn't know why. And he said, but in my heart here, I know it's full of love. I know it's in there. I just haven't had anybody teach me how to let it out yet and make it stick. I mean, whoa. This kid was like 19 when he was saying this, and he wanted so much for somebody to love him enough to show him how to love, with all the love he knows is built up in his body, because he's been waiting all his life to share it with somebody. I mean, I just wanted to boohoo as I listened to some of these young people on this film. So, if folks out there, if you want to go and, see if you can find maybe Google Institute for Family and see if they can set you up to watch From Place to Place. It's really a marvelous film. And so maybe they'll share it with you as well. So thank you both so much for sharing your afternoon or time when we recorded this, so we can show this to our friends on a Tuesday morning. I appreciate the scheduling issues that we often have with this, and certainly hope to see both of you maybe back in the future.
Thank you,
very
Steve.
much. Thank you.
All right, everybody, take care, and we'll see you next week.
See you next
Bye-bye.
time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
This episode is brought to you in partnership with our friends at United Healthcare. For more information about United Healthcare, please visit www.uhc.com.